Hello everybody! Welcome to another episode of Semi-tolerable ranting. I'm your host, Nate FT. On this episode of the show that was, to everyone's surprise and my shock in particular, not a one-time thing, we are going to be talking about a man who fought for his culture and people, and in doing so, angered the rich old white men who owned everything at the time and kind of still do. Louis Riel! Before we jump in, I believe I must inform you, dear viewer, of the essential question. In this film, we are asking, what ethical judgments were made to justify oppression in Canada? Louis Riel was born October 22nd, 1844, Saint-Boniface, Red River Settlement. He, in many ways, followed the footsteps of his father, Louis Riel Sr., and was inspired as such to get a proper education and carve out his niche in the politics of early Canada. He went to the province of Quebec to educate himself, and while there, caught the eye of the Roman Catholic clergy. He was seen as a likely candidate for the priesthood, and thus was granted a scholarship to a school in Montreal. While in Quebec, he got engaged to a young French-Canadian woman. While they fully intended to marry, their plans were shut down by the woman's parents, who, in their bias and racism, would not allow their daughter to wed a Métis. This marked the end of his time in Quebec, but not even close to the end of his troubles. After returning home, he found out about the Hudson's Bay Company selling Rupert's Land to the British government, who would then gift it to the new Canadian government. He found it unjust that the Métis people were not even consulted before this decision was made. He was afraid of an influx of Anglo-Protestants who would take power away from his already nearly powerless people. Louis Riel became part of a movement that formed its own provisional government and resisted the sale of Métis land by the rich white European overlords. Since he was a well-educated, sharp-tongued man, he quickly became secretary of this new provisional government and was later elected its president. Unfortunately for Riel, an armed revolt from the English and Scottish Protestant Canadians went underway and had to be put down. The young provisional government sentenced a young Orangeman, Irish defender of Protestantism, by the name of Thomas Scott to death by firing squad, and Louis Riel was blamed for his death. Now, by this point, some pretty strong opinions had been developed on Riel. In Ontario, he was seen as Thomas Scott's murderer, and a bounty of $5,000 was offered for his arrest. In Quebec, he was revered as a hero, a defender of French culture and religion in the Northwest. Shoving that aside for a moment, he also got involved in politics and was elected into Parliament twice, but expelled both times. He then was actually offered a large sum of money by Premier John A. Macdonald to leave Her Majesty's domains for 5 years. He lived in the United States during that time, but had a serious mental breakdown. Despite what he wanted, his family admitted him to hospital, and he was transferred to an insane asylum. After his exile, Louis Riel returned to his home to help his people in dealing with the Canadian government. He petitioned the government and got a Métis Bill of Rights as a result. Unfortunately for him, the Canadian government took military action against his provisional government, and he was captured. He was tried for insanity in court, and while he could have lived, albeit being legally insane, he denied these accounts and said that his actions had been fully intended. This decision assured his death, and he was hung in Regina, Saskatchewan, on November 16, 1885. Riel may have died, but his legacy lived on. He became a martyr for his people, and he was recognized as a defender of minorities who had been wronged by the Canadian government. Now, to answer the driving question, the judgments made by the ruling class of the time that, in their eyes, made oppression the ideal course of action were that they believed they needed more land for farming and industry that was currently owned by the First Nations. They wanted this land, so they attempted to sour the public opinion of the native people to the point of xenophobia. With the majority of the population convinced, the rich old white men went ahead and took land for themselves, and since the public now supported such a thing, these horrible greedy people could abuse and oppress the first people without fear of repercussions. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Semi-tolerable ranting, and do let me know if you want to see more. I'm really curious. Goodbye!